Good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar, Automate to Compete Globally. Today we have two hosts, Jack Yao, President of Applied Engineering, and Jordan Kretchmer, CEO of Rapid Robotics. And we're going to go ahead and start off with some introductions. Jordan, if you'd like to go ahead and get started and go first.
Sure. My name is Jordan Kretchmer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rapid Robotics. We're based in San Francisco with offices around the country. And I'm looking forward to talking more about the market that we are delivering for manufacturing and more about what Rapid does and what we're doing with applied engineering.
Hi, my name is Jack Yao. I'm the president of Applied Engineering. We're a contract manufacturing company based in San Jose. We do quite a bit of work with Rapid Robotics, and I'm really looking forward to having our conversation today, Jordan. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Me too. Jack and I have known each other for some time and have been working together since 2019. Should be a lot of fun. And so just a quick on the agenda. We're going to give some quick background both on applied engineering and Rapid and a little bit on the work we're doing together. We're going to talk about the state of the labor market and the impact on production with a focus on US manufacturing. We're going to talk, unlike most webinars, we talk about the problem. We're actually going to talk about paths to automation success and how we're working with customers like Applied Engineering on that. And then Jack and I are going to talk a little bit about the future and then open it up for Q&A for everybody. So Jack, why don't you give an intro on Applied Engineering?
Yeah, glad to. So Applied Engineering, we're a company based in San Jose, like I mentioned in the past. We're contract manufacturing, really focused on highly precision equipment and complex assemblies. So we're founded in 1978, and one good thing about us is we're 100% employee owned. So everybody here at Applied Engineering is an employee owner. That's Jordan, yeah, thanks. So, like I said previously, we're contract manufacturing, but what differentiates us is we really focus on large turnkey equipment. A lot of our systems that we build are extremely complex. It has multiple engineering disciplines, probably marries all engineering disciplines in many of the cases. We also build electronic boxes as well as precision coils. And so a lot of the projects that we do are focused around technology. And our volumes range from prototypes to very high volume manufacturing. And Jordan and I would talk a little bit more about that in future slides.
Yeah, and so thanks, Jack. So when we started Rapid in 2019, we started with a very, very small team of people. We were 5 folks on the team. We had 1 mechanical engineer. And so we needed a lot of support. And so we needed to find a partner to help us launch the company to market, who could handle every aspect of NPI all the way through scaling of delivery of a solution that includes both hardware and software. And we needed somebody who could work with us both at an early stage as well as we started to scale and deliver more and more units. And so working with Applied Engineering, we started with just general NPI, getting the product right, working through variations, going through some DFM process, which was incredibly helpful. Then Applied Engineering handles all the subcontractor management for us, vendor procurement, negotiating contracts, assembly of our units, the storage of components. Again, I mentioned sourcing of external vendors, and then most importantly, even all the way the delivery of the last mile between the assembly and our end customers. And so this has been a really productive relationship from the very beginning, and has allowed us to, from a very, very small stage, where most CMs would kind of balk at working with a company of our size, Applied Engineering jumped in as a partner and worked with us from the very beginning. And a lot of our success does have to do with the fact that Applied Engineering was able to help us accelerate that. And so at Rapid, just a quick on what we are. So we look at ourselves as a labor supply company, and we just happen to supply automated labor into a market that is so in desperate need of labor for simple tasks right now. And so at the end of the day, our mission is to facilitate the reshoring of as much revenue as possible by automating away the simple tasks, machine operator tasks that have historically required a human, even though the task itself is very simple. And so we focus very specifically on manufacturing and secondary and sometimes primary operations. And we do this at a fraction of the cost of human labor with a business model that's OpEx driven. So you're paying us just like you would pay human operators, which makes it way more accessible to start automation. And we'll talk a little bit about the concept of top-down automation versus bottoms-up automation as we start talking about solutions for introducing automation into your facilities. And the reason why my co-founder Ruddick and I, when we looked at this market and specifically chose to work on manufacturing and machine tending, machine operator kinds of roles, is that there is an existential crisis in manufacturing right now in the form of a labor shortage that is growing on a not just even monthly basis. It's growing, you can measure it on a weekly basis now. And this has been picked up in all major press. You can look them up in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, in Manufacturing Institute reports. And so across the board, this is what we're seeing. So just a month ago, this number was at 600,000 unfilled machine operator positions in the US alone. And so the reason I like to talk about this is because most customers, when we walk into a manufacturing facility, most customers think that it's only them that has this problem. It's only them that are struggling to hire workers. It's only them where the labor rates are going up. And it's just not the case. There isn't a manufacturer in this country we have spoken to who isn't experiencing some sort of labor crunch, whether it's on the inability to find people, or when they find people, it's so expensive to hire them now that the ROI, that the margins, cost of production for certain tasks don't even make sense to do anymore. So what ends up happening is if you're not bidding on projects because you don't have the labor or the labor is too expensive, and if you're not winning the projects, then you don't have the revenue to hire more people. And so it's a kind of a downward spiral that we started Rapid to help stave off. And sort of on the left and right of this slide are just your standard metrics around why automation is so productive versus human labor. The costs of human labor going up, the churn rate of human labor, the hiring risks of trying to bring on human labor, the time required and the cost required for that, and of course the consistent the quality issues that come. 68% of quality issues are typically line operators. And so when you back this out on a global scale, this labor demand disparity is what's really causing the shift of production that's been happening over the last 20 years from the US to China. And again, we're going to focus on the US market for this, but China is actually experiencing this now too. About 20% of Chinese manufacturing is now being outsourced to Vietnam. And so this is kind of a race to the bottom situation. And at the end of the day, what we talk to manufacturers about is the idea of balancing out or offsetting your cost of labor from human labor mix to automated mix. This is not about fully automating, lights out, automating your facility. What we need to do is work with manufacturers to get the average cost of labor across a facility low enough to where it actually makes more sense to produce locally in the US than it does to go overseas. And the way you do that is by introducing automation bottoms up, automating away the simple things. It's not lights out, it's a mix of human and automated labor to bring your labor rate average across your facility down to $21 an hour, fully burdened, is in most regions of the US the marker where you actually turn positive, meaning it's better to produce in the US than it is to China. So we've got about an $11 to $12 average disparity right now in the cost of labor. So our goal as Rapid is to work with the manufacturing sector to help start to bring that average labor rate as low as possible to where deals start getting won back into the US. And this is working with our customers, and we'll give some examples in just a bit. And so when the share of labor, the reason why this is so important and why we look at it this way is when the share of manual labor in your overall facility declines, operating margins, output, and quality all increase. And in fact, so this is data from the Manufacturing Institute and MIT did a joint study on this and found that when labor, the cost of labor share decreases by 15%, your margins can double, and in most cases to more than 20%, up from 7 to 10%. And so it's really, really important that we start looking at it this way. All right, And so in the past, what manufacturers typically run into and why there's been a lot of disappointment, I call this automation disillusionment. Manufacturers have been really, really disappointed for the promise of automation. And there are very, very few of you who haven't been told both by the press and by other manufacturers, you have to automate to survive. The problem is there's been no solution presented to you that enables you to actually do that. And so the solution in most cases ends up being sort of a hodgepodge of systems integration and lots of hardware purchases and lots of reprogramming of robots, and the whole thing becomes very, very expensive. And so when we looked at the market, there's about 20% of tasks that exist in a factory that are right for big automation projects. So think about bottling lines, car manufacturing, assembly. There are places where spending 10, 15, $20 million fully automating a part of your facility or even your whole facility makes sense. But for about 80% of the tasks that are required to build any product, and we're talking about the smaller parts of the whole, that 80%, that's where no solution exists today, and where Rapid has been focusing. And so these are, kind of hard to see these videos, but just good examples of these kind of simple, constrained tasks that are kind of out of band, out of line. They can be in line with other humans, but most of these are secondary operations, simple machines, highly repetitive. They exist at scale, kind of ubiquitous across different manufacturing sectors. And by focusing here on these tasks, we can work with our customers on that concept of bottoms-up automation, not top-down. So instead of saying we're going to automate the entire line, we walk around with our customers and find these kinds of very repetitive tasks. And so think, pad printers, ultrasonic welders, heat stakers, hot stampers, CNC, lathe, machine loading kinds of things. Also things like simple kitting, packing, simple assembly. And the biggest blocker to manufacturers being able to do this in the past has been systems integrators. And so of 98% of manufacturers don't have a single cobot or six-jointed robot on the floor. Many have Cartesian robots pulling parts out of injection mold machines and things like that. But in terms of actual robotic labor, it only exists in about 2% of facilities in the US, which is crazy shocking, but true. And the reason why is because deploying a robot to one of those kinds of simple, repetitive manufacturing tasks that I just showed on the previous slide is so prohibitively expensive and complex that it makes it impossible to do, leaving only the really expensive automation options for you, which at the end of the day, as we discussed, just doesn't work. It doesn't convert. And so if you work with a systems integrator and you spend $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 deploying a single robot to a single task on your floor, it takes years to recoup that. And I've got a nice slide coming up that will get into a little bit more detail on this. But what Rapid has done in the market is come and remove the need for a systems integrator to deploy a robot against these simple, repetitive, out-of-band sort of secondary operations that are incredibly costly. The margin that we see with our customers on these tasks is usually like 1/4 cent to 1/8 cent per part. And so the cost of labor or robotic labor is very, very important. If you spend $400,000 on a robot, you're going to spend 2.5 to 3 years recouping that cost before you're in the green. And so most manufacturers don't do that because obviously in 2.5 years, most of what those machines are doing is going to change. And you can't afford to be in the red for 2.5 years on a task that you then have to turn over and have reprogrammed and pay more money for later. And so these are really this is sort of the vector of all of the problems in the market that have been restricting manufacturers from being able to automate for so long. And so this is sort of the trifecta: the accelerating labor shortage, rising labor costs, and rising automation integration costs create that perfect storm that has led us to this really shocking slide where in the last 30 years, manufacturers have gone from, so 30 years ago in 1990, manufacturers had 25 robots per 10,000 workers. And today it's just over 200 robots. So in 30 years, we still only have 200 robots per 10,000 human workers. And so that's the number that our solution is working to fix, that ratio, in order to lower that average cost of labor. And so the solution itself is called the Rapid Machine Operator. So that was everything about the market and sort of the dynamics that are at play that everybody is experiencing. The solution that Rapid brought to market, that we worked with Applied Engineering on all of the hardware assemblies and distribution and vendor networks for, is called the Rapid Machine Operator. It is a fully integrated solution. So it is the only robotic solution on the market that comes to your doorstep, knowing how to perform the tasks that you have hired it to do right out of the gate. And we can deploy these very, very quickly. So almost every deployment we can do within 2 weeks of a first meeting, understanding the tasks at play. And then we do all of the training of the arm in AI using a proprietary system in the cloud. We train all of the motion pathing and the identification of where the parts are in the work cell in the cloud using CAD files. This enables us to be really flexible with the kinds of tasks that the arms can do. It also means the AI is controlling a vast majority of the motion and what the arm is doing in the work cell, which also means there's almost no interaction required by you or your operators with the robot. It's as simple as come in the morning, turn it on, fill the fixtures if there are fixtures, make sure there are parts coming down the conveyor if it's connected to a conveyor, turning the robot on, and the vision system that comes with the system does the rest of the work along with the AI that lives underneath the arm. And so that makes this very deployable very quickly and delivers on our vision of being an instantly scalable workforce to help offset human labor as well as reduce costs and increase margins really dramatically across the board. And so on the cost side of things, we really built this model. In fact, we started the company with a business model first, and then built the technology, the AI and the computer vision work in order to support a go-to-market strategy that we can bring to you as customers that is really, really accessible. And so what that means is basically creating an OpEx payment model where you're not spending $500,000 all at once and continuously trying to recoup that cost over years and years, but you can actually address your automation or your labor concerns instantly for only $3,750 a month, $3,750 a month in year one. And that covers the one-time setup fee where we're doing all of the setup work in advance before we come on site for the deployment that happens in under a day. And then in years 2 and beyond, that setup fee goes away. So it's only $2,100 a month every year after that first year, which is 50 to 75% cheaper than your standard human labor fully burdened. And to put a finer point on that, oh, it looks like this slide got a little messed up there, but the main points are here. The green line here, it's not giving me my mouse control. Anyway, I'll talk to it. So the dark red line, it represents a systems integrator model where you spend $400,000 or $500,000 on an initial deployment of the robot to a single task. And you can see there, the lighter red line is the cumulative cost of what human labor would be on that single task. And so you can see there that at 2.5 years is where it flips over and you start to become positive. That is only assuming that that robot has never had to work on anything else and has had no issues that the systems integrator has to come back and fix. And so you can see here why there are so few robots in especially contract manufacturing environments where there's a higher mix, lower volume setup. It makes absolutely no sense for a manufacturer to spend that kind of money on automation with a systems integrator, because by the time it would break even, you've probably had to spend more money on maintenance, support, and changeovers of what that robot is working on, versus the green line, which is the cumulative cost of a single rapid machine operator over the course of 7 years, leading to a total profit versus human labor on the same task of just under $1.2 million over 7 years. The most important part of this slide is the very left-hand side, which is that Rapid is net positive ROI the second you deploy it versus the human labor that was there. And the way that works, if you kind of want to run the numbers in your head, is if you are running 3 shifts on, let's just say it's a pad printer. Those 3 shifts on a pad printer cost you 3 humans times, so 3 humans a day times your fully burdened labor rate, versus Rapid, which we do not charge per shift, we charge just that monthly rate, which means the second you deploy a Rapid machine operator, the profitability of that task has just gone up to the point where most of our customers actually find that after 1 month of operation, the savings or increased profit margin on that task has actually paid for the purchase of additional Rapid machine operators to work on additional tasks over time. So now to the last part of this before Jack and I have a conversation. So videos. And so I'm going to click through just a few of these so you can see what this transformation looks like kind of as viscerally as possible. So this was a task that was done by a human operator for years. This is the backplate for semiconductor chips. This is Kobe and Shaq, aptly named a duo here. They have been working on these parts for a better part of 1.5 years now. And all we are doing is putting an adhesive band on the backplate for the semiconductor chips before they get shipped. And this is a great example of where they had 1 human a shift over 3 shifts doing this task. We put 2 robots to work all 3 shifts because you can see the human has 2 hands. We cannot work that fast. That is perfectly fine in our world of the way we do robotic deployments, because the cost of these 2 arms is $50,000 a year versus the cost of 3 operators over the course of the year per shift. They are saving or making an extra $125,000 annually on this task by deploying 2 robots versus having 3 humans over the course of the year. This is an example where it was a 1-for-1 replacement, and we actually are doing production at about 20% faster rate. This is a hot stamping task, this task is a little bit more involved. This uses vision to detect the orientation of the cylinder to make sure that the cylinder is getting placed on the appropriate side for the logo to be stamped onto it. And so there's actually a lot of AI that's involved here, looking at the parts coming down the conveyor, identifying the orientation, picking them from the correct orientation in real time, getting them accurately to the machine, then putting them onto the drying rack, which then takes them to the next station, where we are also doing a boxing and kitting step that I do not have a video in here for, but I think you get the idea from that. So this one, it looks like I'm not going to have the ability, oh, I will, to fast forward through it. Here we go. So this is a multi-robot coordination. So where the first video I showed you was 2 robots working independently. This is 4 of our Rapid machine operators working in line and producing a medical device kit. So this is a box of pipettes. I'm going to fast forward through this for time's sake, but you can see the robots are actually waiting for each other to finish each task before moving forward. And what you're seeing here is the arms actually doing, and I'll kind of look on this one, doing full assembly of this entire kit of pipette tips for this medical device company, picking up the step-by-step, passing it to the next RMO. And you see here, this is a great one for accuracy. We can pick up 100 pipette tips from a tray. And the challenge here is using the vision system to make sure that all of those tiny little sub-millimeter pipette tips go flawlessly into all of their little holes right there. And then you can see we detected that the pipette tray wasn't fully in. We nudge it over, get it exactly aligned, and pop it into place. Okay.
That's amazing.
And for the final video is working in EMS. And so if you're doing any sort of PCB production or EMS related work, we work with PCB where we do adhesive application, loading for fly testing and X-ray testing, and all sorts of other stuff with PCB. And so this is an example of the end effectors being the applicator and working directly on the part, not necessarily machine loading. So I show this to show the flexibility of the system. It's not just machine loading and unloading. It can also be interacting directly with parts and products, doing assembly, doing kitting, and things of that nature. All right. So with that, I think we're going to exit out of the market and about Rapid and AE and go to a discussion.
Wow, that was really really good, Jordan. Thanks for sharing all that information and video.
You got it.
Let's see. Well, I got a question for you. So, you briefly touched on this. It's basically, how did our partnership help you grow through this last couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, when we were looking for a partner, we talked to a number of different places, and Jack, you and I had known each other, so you had a leg up in this process. But the one thing that really jumped out to us was how much work you and your team were willing to do with us and for us. With being an early stage company, I think when we first started talking, we hadn't even closed funding yet. And so as an early stage company, to find a partner like that was so incredibly valuable for us, managing all of the assembly work, doing the first assembly of our first ever unit off the line and coming to us and saying, we found these 8 areas for improvement. 1, to reduce costs, 2, to improve rigidity of the system. I mean, it was invaluable and irreplaceable. And there was nobody else we spoke to that was willing to work with us like that and grow with us. And that's sort of the important thing. As we've deployed more and more units, we've been able to, you guys are proactively, your team, I don't even know if you know they're doing this, they're proactively coming to us with design ideas, and they're proactively negotiating with subcontractors and vendors on our behalf to get us better pricing as we're scaling. And of course, as we're scaling, we have additional needs like storage. I think you guys are storing, 24 robot arms and an entire tray systems for us right now. And so as a growing company without the time or bandwidth or desire to go out and find warehouses everywhere, you guys are storing it all for us. So that, I mean, as we're growing, we're finding more and more ways that AE is adding value to us.
Well, I mean, not just the value, but we also believe in what you do. We're just not just a partner for you in manufacturing, but we're also a customer.
That is true. I probably should have mentioned that. Yes, it does also help. It goes both ways. And so, yes, you and the team, and I think that's really important. The passion that you guys have had for what we do, and the fact that you said we've got opportunities to use your system has been great for us as well. Certainly this has been a partnership and one that will last a long time.
Yeah, I believe so. And as we scale, we'll continue to implement your RMO solutions, because I truly believe that's the way for us, kind of a smaller entity to continue to grow and be able to compete globally as a part of this, as our chat.
That's great to hear. I'm going to hold you to that. So
yeah, I'm sure you will.
I've got one for you, and it has to do with the first part of my presentation around the offshoring that has been happening, and as a result of increase of cost of labor and the labor shortage and all of this. So I know that one of the answers is work with Rapid. I know that is true. But besides work with Rapid, what are you guys doing at Applied Engineering to attract and maintain local customers and clients who are sticking with you, regardless of offshoring opportunities?
No, that's a really good question. Offshoring, facing lower cost regions is always a challenge, and I've known that since joining Applied Engineering. But one of the big things, as you alluded to in the previous talk, is that we have a very seasoned team of new product introductory team, and we'll proactively engage with our customers, such as Rapid, and we'll provide value propositions to help you scale and really take you from a prototype level to a production level, and realizing the company dream, if you will. And so our team is locally here. That type of effort is never replaceable. You can never outsource this kind of a real-time response for our internal experts. Not just the program management and the NPI, the new product team, the engineering team, and so on, but our supply chain has quite a wide web that we cast. So what we do is, to help a lot of the local companies, we actually do have a sourcing team globally for a lot of the components to ensure the best material cost for a lot of our customers to stay competitive. So we'll source material the best quality globally, and we'll bring it here. And why do we bring it here and assemble? Well, many of the companies that we work with are technology companies, and everybody is sensitive about their IP. Their intellectual property is really their key, the essence of their existence. So we do everything we can to protect that intellectual property by doing everything in-house, protected within the confines of our facility. The source piece parts, those are less so of intellectual concern. And so we'll get those things integrated here, do the core testing with our customers, and make sure that the product is deployed in real time. And lastly, with this recent pandemic that happened, there's a lot more focus on insourcing and bringing things onshore. And I think we're starting to see that more and more, where a lot of the supply chain were interrupted because they were in China or in other places of the world that were hit more heavily on this pandemic. So
yeah, at some point it feels like the risk, even like the labor cost aside, right? It feels like at some point the risk of the volatility of the supply chain, not just because of COVID, but what happened in the Suez Canal, which is, hopefully a freak one-time thing, but it's made everybody we speak to is completely flipped their thinking on this, right? Where is it more important to get it, 20 cents cheaper, or is it more important to make sure you get it at all, right? And that's sort of the calculus that that everybody's going through now. That we obviously are very excited to help support to make that to make the cost side of the equation not as much of an issue, because this is it's a regional problem that becomes a global issue, right? As the more that these supply chains and material chains are connected, the more risk everybody is taking on by utilizing those global supply chains.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and logistics cost is not going, it's not going cheaper. So recently we're facing a lot of that logistics cost increase as well. So being local and working with local partners, especially for startup companies, it's crucial in the success for a lot of these companies.
Yeah.
Okay, so you presented, you show a lot of the videos. They're very simple tasks of pick and place. Why focus on the simple task? What's the key aspect of the focus on the machine operators there?
Yeah, so the answer is very simple. Well, it's a few things. One, nobody else was focusing on it. So the cost of deploying a robot to these very simple tasks is as expensive as deploying a really complicated task. And that was crazy to us. So we started there, right? So first of all, 80% of production is these tasks that require a human operator. And so when we looked at that, we're like, well, that's a bulk majority of production. So if we're going to create a solution that's going to have the biggest impact on as much of the market, as many of the customers as possible, especially with a focus on SMB. So, manufacturers doing $20 million of revenue up to, we have customers doing up to $1.5 billion, but we needed to make a solution that was accessible to a majority of the market, which in this market is the SMB space, right? The SMB space is a vast majority of production in the US. And so by focusing on machine tending, machine operator, sort of simple, repetitive things, we ends up targeting a lot of those SMB contract manufacturers that exist. So that was sort of a high level market approach. But then when we looked at the kinds of tasks within manufacturing, we wanted to go into places that are highly structured, predictable, and repeatable. And so these simple secondary machine operations tend to always be that, where the parts are either fixtured or could easily be fixtured, or our camera system can easily see into a bucket for unstructured picking, or it can be attached to a conveyor where our vision system can click on and recognize a part, and the parts are generally in the same location. And the process itself is very, very repetitive, to the point where our system can identify anytime something goes wrong. So in manufacturing, as I'm sure as all of you know, edge cases are everywhere. And one of the biggest issues with manually programming a robot to go to very specific waypoints is that if anything even minutely changes, the ground, especially in the Bay Area, the ground can shift by even a millimeter. All of your waypoints are going to be off, and it has to be reprogrammed. And that's what our AI and computer vision gets rid of, which is really, really powerful. So with these use cases where we have known parts, right, the customers can give us CAD files of the parts. We have CAD files of the fixtures and of the machines. Then our AI can make all the decisions in the real world based off those CAD files. And so, there's other robotics companies that focus on like unstructured sorting for e-commerce and recycling bin sorting and things like that. Those are incredibly hard problems to solve, and the market for them is fairly small. So by focusing here, we're having the biggest impact possible on the most amount of tasks that we can possibly do with the least amount of effort in terms of building technology. So we were able to deploy our first robot to market 3 months after we started the company because of this focus on these tasks where we have all the data before we even come on site with the robot to train the robot on that task. And so it's a perfect meeting point of sort of very structured environments and our ability to train the robots on those very structured environments with the minimal amount of edge cases that could crop up that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think those edge cases then increase the cost of ownership, of course, with the solution. And so I think it's very good that you focus on the key task at hand.
So, and I've got one back for you then. Let's see. Our partnership, so working with us, so we see a lot when we walk into a facility, even some really, really large, not SMB facilities. There's sort of this like light bulb that goes off when we start talking about bottoms up transformation. So I'm just wondering, if working with us for the last year, how has this changed your perception of how you can automate and your ability to automate over time?
Yeah, that's for sure. So that's a great question. Previous to this, I don't know if you know, I did work for an integrator, and our focus really was on hard automation, if you will. It's really complex automation of systems, and that type of automation is fairly costly, as you have presented, and the typical return on investment for those type of automation systems are 2+ years, as you've shown in one of your graphs. So my perception there is generally that return on investment is relatively slow, and it's really cost prohibitive if you don't have cash in place. If you don't have the funding, it's really not practical to implement something like that. And so that's been my impression with robot and automation implementation. It's good, but you got to pay to play. And so with your solution, and this is one of the reasons why I signed up as a customer fairly early on, it's because of the business model that you have that provides, kind of pay per month usage, as well as your team deploying an expert team of engineers to be able to solve my automation solution. And so that practicality of implementing a robot really changed my mind about whether or not a robot can be used in a manufacturing space without dumping a ton of cash into it. Not only that, the deployment of your solution is so quick that it changes the whole landscape of how robots can be implemented. Again, my experience is with a system integrator where implementing a robot takes 6 months at best, at the very best, perhaps even year plus in some cases. So your solution is definitely eye-opening, and your team is certainly, with the expertise there, has done a great job in putting the solution in play.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and the team is fantastic, and I'll kind of latch onto that because we get questions on this all the time. We do support the integrations, and Jack brought this up. We have an amazing team of deployment technicians who come out and actually, when I say that as the customer, there's really nothing that you have to do for the system, I really mean that, including the deployment of a new unit. Our team comes out, and in some cases, we're in and out in less than 3 hours, and in the majority of cases, it's less than a day of just setting up and testing and perfecting all of the AI and making sure that the cameras can see everything appropriately and that it's picking up the parts correctly, and we're out of there. And at that point, there's no reprogramming work that has to happen. And if anything goes sideways, let's say an edge case crops up that we hadn't trained the AI on, didn't know about, we are out there, and our support team is real time 24/7. And then, in the very seldom case where we have to come on site for a maintenance item or something like that, then we're there same day. And so that's something that, hopefully is helpful as you guys start scaling with us as well into more use cases. And so another one back at you. So the labor shortage during COVID. Talk to me about how you got through that and came out the other side, because we've heard all different versions of we had to lay off 50% of our staff, and now we're trying to hire them back. We were able to maintain them. Talk about how you got applied engineering through that. And I know we're not through it yet by any stretch, but how did you get through the brunt of it, and what's your plans for it going forward?
Yeah, that's definitely something still fresh in my head. We reflect on this fairly regularly as far as dealing with the pandemic. So when the pandemic first hit, obviously it was a shock to the system. But fortunately, our team was proactively, again, engaged with what's happening. So we were implementing safety precautions ahead of time. And a lot of the social distance and regulations requirements in terms of occupancy and so on, we were implementing that well before the shelter in place was a fact of life last year. So we had that in place. Another aspect of it is we were able to have plenty of space and social distance in our facility. A lot of the safety protocol, as we were implementing it, we just added a lot more to ensure the safety of all our employee, obviously, and customers, as well as our suppliers that were to come into contact with us. And one of the more important things for us, how we got through it, we not only went through the year safely, we actually grew through the year. And one of the key aspects of sustaining that growth through a pandemic year is we're very, very selective in working with the right customer. And many of the customers that we work with, number one, has a great solution, and not only that, a solution for manufacturing sectors, but a great solution to make the world a better place. So many of our customers that we work with are essential suppliers, and governments have deemed them essential businesses. And through them, we were able to maintain our operations throughout the time. And we were fortunate to not only retain all of our employees, but we also hired quite a few talent to add to our staff to better support a lot of our customers, such as Rapid.
That's impressive. Yeah, we experienced the same thing. I mean, we scaled up aggressively. We started COVID. We were, I think, 7 or 8 people, maybe 9 when at the beginning of COVID. We're now 34. So wow. We did the same. We pulled the same move, primarily because, I mean, if you can imagine, I mean, we had a lot of customers who were having to do socially distanced lines where they needed to slot in a robot where a human used to be. For no other reason than they couldn't have the human there. And so, a lot of the growth that we saw was from helping customers during that period of time offset some of the, a lot of our customers didn't have to let any employees go, which was great to see, but they just couldn't have them all there at the same time, which reduced capacity. And so we also, we were able to grow as well, through all of that mess.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect for your business case. I mean, unfortunately, it's a pandemic, but in a case like this, it is definitely a wise solution to have in your production.
Yeah, and we viewed it as, yes, it's an unfortunate situation, but we wanted to help out wherever we could and help keep as many people's lights on as we possibly could. And it was nice to be able to support that throughout.
Yeah, so as you bring more and more robotic units out into the field, what are some of the big fallacies or wrong impressions that your customers have about implementing or automating their production lines?
Well, so the biggest one is that in almost every meeting we go into, there's always an idea in their head of what they want automated. So there's always that thing that they've wanted to automate for 5 or 10 years, and they've gotten bids to do it, and they're all too expensive. And they usually come in and they show us that thing. We want to automate that whole line, and we want to do it this way. And that's not always the best way to do it, because again, it's that morphing the concept from top down to bottoms up. Don't think about fully automating an entire section. Think about automating little bits and pieces that are, like not very valuable tasks that are, carry the same weight to automate them. And so that's kind of the big switch. And there's a lot of disillusionment around trusting robotics companies. Like they've worked with robotics companies in the past. I won't name any names. Most of them don't exist anymore anyway, where there was a lot of promise and then just not a lot of meat under there. So they would try a deployment, they paid all this money, and then 6 months later they had to call them back to come redo it. And so the barrier that we have to get over is overcoming that lack of trust in the robotics sector that manufacturers have. And the robotics market has trained manufacturers to not trust robots, right? And so that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have. And the more deployments that we do and the more case studies that we're getting about how much money we're saving, and we have not had a single robot returned to us from a customer since we started the company. And that says a lot about that trust that we're building. Most of our new customers come from word of mouth these days, which is good. And the goal is to be the trusted source of automated labor that everybody knows if we say that we can do that task, we can do it. And another thing that we do is we say no to a lot of stuff. So when we walk into a facility and a customer says, I really, really, really need this thing automated. And we say, well, what if we just freed up 5 operators from over here to give you 5 more operators to go work on that really complex thing? It's the exact same thing, because we're talking about average cost of labor balancing between human and automated, not necessarily reducing the cost just on that task. And so when we start to get that, that's really the big change that we're making. And I would say the other thing that we always get is, how on earth do you stay in business? There's no way that pricing model works. Our answer to that is systems integrators have been jacking up the prices and increasing the price of robotic integrations for the last 10 years. And so the real cost of deploying a robot, when you've done what we have done, which is productize the deployment so that we're not doing custom deployments every time, we've productized that process, we can save enormous amounts of time and money. And that's pretty much how we do it, is we've automated the process of deploying robotic automation. And that removing that barrier. And once customers realize that, they realize, oh, okay, so you're basically making money without upcharging us by productizing all of the work that SIs are charging us to do individually every single time over and over and over again, right? And so that's sort of the trick to our trade, I would say. But that's the biggest thing for the customers, is that realization that, when they start looking at the ROI numbers, where they had 3 human operators over a 24-hour period, and they're going to deploy 1 of our rapid machine operators, and it's going to increase their profit margin by 160 grand annually for a task that they used to be doing 10 to 20,000 of net profit on, right? And so, and most of these, I'm sure all of you think about these tasks as secondary, tertiary, like whatever, we have to do them, but there's gold in there in terms of profitability that we try to uncover. And that's the big thing for our customers. When they realize that, it's a big eye-opening moment.
Oh yeah, it sounds like a winning solution, because you've implemented somewhere around 100 robots in the Bay Area, and expanding into different regions of the U.S. Obviously this is a winning solution. So your customers are seeing it.
We're in Michigan now. We are in Minnesota now. We're going to Southern California soon, Texas. So we've got big plans that are all going to hit you and your team, Jack.
Okay, we'll be ready for you.
Awesome. So I think we're at time on the main section, and going to I think we got some Q&A from audience.
Q&A. Yeah, we have a couple questions here for you guys. So the first question is, what is the best path to the idea of automation to the decision makers at my company?
Sorry, say one more time. Best path to automation.
Sure. What is the best path to sell the idea?
Hey, Liana, I'm losing you. You keep freezing. I'm losing you.
Sure. Let me go ahead and just put the questions in the question section of the sidebar, and you can see them there.
No, okay, sounds good.
Maybe if I just do audio, can you hear me? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better. I think it was just your
Perfect.
video. That's good.
Okay, perfect. So what is the best path to sell the idea of automation to the decision makers at my company?
Great question. So first of all, is including them early and often. So, and when we first started, we would go and meet with a customer, and it would be sort of the engineering line, the manufacturing line engineer manager, and we would go all the way down, and then that person would bring us up to the VP. The VP we'd have to do the whole thing over again, like re-education again, starting from scratch, and then that would go up to the C-suite, and then we have to do the whole thing again. And so what we found is, because we have developed a solution here that's meant for quick deploy. Well, if the process of getting it sold through internally takes a long, long time, the whole quick deploy thing becomes less valuable. And so for the first deal that we do, we always say, who are the approvers? And so a lot of times we'll be talking to somebody with budget, and we always say, that's fantastic, but who needs to still approve the use of that budget? And how can we involve them? Because we love to collaborate. So we produce for our customers a series of CAD setup files that show exactly what it's going to look like, what the cycle times are going to be, what the daily output of parts is going to be. And we do that as a collaboration where we are designing this new automated work cell in advance. And what we love to do is involve the C-suite as early as possible, especially when we're talking to SMBs, so up to 500, 600 million of annual revenue. The earlier that team can get involved, and we actually also hit where there's holding companies involved, where a holding company needs to give final approval. All of that information is really, really helpful to give us in the beginning, because it gives us a way to set up a process where we can help you as the customer, guide you through educating those people on your team about what's coming. And a lot of the times there's questions around the business model. Why can't we just buy them outright from you? And a lot of those questions can easily be resolved if that team, if those folks are involved earlier. And so that's something that we always strive for, and we don't always get, but it definitely greases the skids and makes it easier to get our robots deployed faster, as to get more people to understand quicker that this is basically just like labor, but it's less expensive, right? This is not like a big purchasing decision that has to be made. It's just a decision. You have 50 open headcount for operators. 10 of those could be rapid machine operators, and getting in there is certainly the challenge. And the sooner that the C-suite or the holding companies or whatever are involved, the easier that goes and the faster.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer when it comes to implementing your solution. For me, when you presented to me, it was a very obvious cost savings. And especially nowadays, it's not necessarily in the sense of replacing operators. You can't get operators in the first place.
That's exactly right.
So,
yeah.
So, where people are thinking about, oh, you're taking over jobs, but you really are not, because we can't hire enough people at this point to be able to do some of these remedial tasks where the robot can take its place. So
there's some great data on this, and for time reasons, I pulled the slide out of this deck, but there's some great data on what introducing automation into your facility increases your ability to hire more skilled labor faster. Okay, and so what ends up happening in every situation, we don't have a single customer anywhere in the country who has let an operator go to replace them with a robot. That is not what happens. What happens is when you introduce robotic labor, your average cost of labor goes down. You can take on more and bid on more projects that you might not have won that you will win. We've got a customer in the East Bay that just won. They'd been producing this project for 8 years, and they were put to a test with an overseas provider. They're using rapid robotic labor on this task, and they were able to maintain that business that they probably would have lost if it was standard human labor rates. okay? And not only that, but because of the labor rates they provided, this customer said it's not worth the risk producing overseas at all anymore, and they won additional business as a result of Rapid machine operators lowering the labor rate in that facility. And so it's really, really important to us that we're not talking about replacing humans. I mean, again, like Jack said, every one of our customers has open headcount for we have one customer that has open headcount for 100 operators to execute. And that's crazy. And what's happening even more is every time Amazon drops a fulfillment center in anywhere near a region, it sucks thousands of blue collar workers away from manufacturers into Amazon fulfillment centers, where they churn through those people and spit them back out after paying them $24, $25 an hour base rates, which manufacturers just can't compete with. And so the only solution is to upskill that labor so that you can afford to pay them more, to do more important, more valuable things. Let the robots do the less valuable, lower margin things, turning those into profit centers. And so the human mix is still vitally important. And there's not been a single customer, and all the data shows that the more automation you bring, the more humans you can hire, and the bigger your business gets, the more revenue you generate. So these things feed each other upward versus the downward motion of not winning a bid because you have human labor and no automation, and then not being able to hire as a result of that.
That's a great point.
It's kind of an inverse relationship that's not immediately instinctual, but it is the case, and it's great to see.
Great, so we have one more question here, and it is, what changes and developments have made automation more feasible for manufacturers?
Yeah, so the main thing is the cost of the hardware. So when you're buying our solution and paying us that monthly fee, you're not paying for the hardware itself. And the way we're able to do that is because we have a relationship with the ARM provider where the hardware is so inexpensive that we can afford to provide you this model with no upcharge, right? And so I think the cost of hardware generally coming down has enabled us to bring this business model to market. So the cameras that we use, the table structures that we use, working with applied engineering to lower the cost of the assembly and the safety structure, right, and all of that stuff has brought our costs down low enough where we've put all of the onus onto the software. And that's the really big trick that we have done that nobody else has done, is having the software do that automated deployment work and automated, adjustment work for us. And so that all said and done makes it feasible for us to provide a pricing structure that is really accessible. We couldn't have started this company, would not have started this company, if we could not provide a solution that was both profitable for us and sustainable for us as a business, so that we're here, 50 years from now as a partner for everybody, but that is also profitable and increases profitability for our customers. And so the cost and commoditization of hardware, I would say, is the number one enabler. And then what we've capitalized on that by building really intensive technology in the software to take advantage of that inexpensive hardware. And so that it's really those two things coming together that made this possible. And of course, the fact that manufacturers are desperate for people. When you drive through any of the manufacturing corridors in any of the subregions, every single building has a sign: hiring operators, hiring operators, hiring operators. And so now is the time from a demand perspective. We're also getting that pull from our customers saying, we tried this 10 years ago and it didn't work, but man, are we ready to try this again with you? And so those three things coming together are what really makes the market right now. And I think that is exactly noon, is it? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
We are right at time. Well, thank you all for your time today. Thank you, Jack and Jordan, for your time.
Thank you for helping out. Appreciate it. Thanks, Absolutely. Jack. Good to chat.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Always a pleasure.
Bye.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.